Before the Spanish came, the people of the Philippines believed in spirits and nature gods. When someone got sick or needed guidance, they didn't just turn to medicine, they turned to the Babaylan. The Babaylan were healers, using herbs and rituals to help the body and spirit. They were trusted spiritual leaders, guiding the community through both sickness and important life decisions. The Babaylan didn't just heal, they could also see the future. They read signs and dreams, offering wisdom on everything from battles to marriage. But everything changed with the arrival of the Spanish in the 1500s. The practices that had been central to Filipino life were no longer accepted. The Spanish saw the Babaylan as a threat. They called them witches, claiming their rituals were evil and against Christianity. Many Babaylan were killed or tortured. Sacred sites were destroyed, and the traditions they upheld were banned. Those who refused to submit were hunted, their knowledge and practices pushed into hiding. With their persecution, the spiritual practices of the Babaylan faded. The knowledge they carried, passed down for generations, was lost. The role of the Babaylan was erased, buried under the weight of foreign rule and religion. The Spaniards and Americans called native Filipinos uncivilized, labeling them as illiterate and barbaric. But this view was completely wrong, very wrong. Before colonization, the Philippines had a rich tradition of writing. Across the islands, there were at least 16 different indigenous writing systems. Examples of these include Kulatan in Pampanga, Hanuno in Mindoro, and Tagbanwa in Palawan, showing the incredible diversity of writing systems in the country. These scripts were used for a wide range of purposes, such as keeping records, writing letters, creating poetry, and even for ceremonies and rituals. One of the most well-known writing systems was Babaylan, which was widely used in major areas of Luzon during the 16th and 17th centuries. However, when the Spaniards arrived, they used language as a tool for colonization. Instead of using our own writing system, they taught their own language to establish their knowledge and superiority in society. This way, they could control the natives and keep them in ignorance. They didn't just use language to spread Christianity. They also used it to handle important tasks like keeping records, collecting taxes, and running schools. By doing this, they maintained their power and position in society. One important piece of evidence from this time is the Doctrina Christiana, which was printed in 1593 and is considered the first book in the Philippines. While it included Babaylan, its true purpose was clear: to erase native beliefs and teach Christian teachings. Over time, the indigenous writing systems slowly disappeared. Sacred writings were destroyed, and oral traditions were silenced. The colonizers' alphabet took over, erasing centuries of knowledge and cultural identity. In 1565, the first thing the Spanish did when they arrived in the Philippines was take control of the land. They introduced the encomienda system, which allowed Spanish soldiers, settlers, and officials to claim land and collect tribute from the local people. In return, they promised to protect the people and teach them Christianity. The local people stayed on the land and continued to farm, but the Spanish encomenderos controlled it. Many encomenderos did not live on the land, so they were like landlords who were never there. King Philip II of Spain ordered that the local Filipino nobility, known as the Principalia, be treated like Spanish nobles. If they became Christians, they would keep their land rights. This helped the local elites keep their power and land under Spanish rule. Over time, the Principalia began to marry European settlers and Chinese traders, creating wealthy families. When the United States took control of the Philippines in 1898, these families still kept their land. However, the Spanish Church had to sell its large land holdings, and government monopolies were sold off. Under American rule, some land reforms began, but the wealthy Principalia families still had a lot of land and power. Before colonization, women in the Philippines were highly respected. They were healers, priestesses, warriors, and even leaders. A datu's daughter could inherit leadership, standing equal with men in the eyes of the community. Women were central to trade and commerce. They managed businesses, wove fabrics, crafted pottery, and created jewelry to barter with other tribes and foreign merchants like the Chinese. In the Ifugao region, women even had the right to divorce. If their husbands were unfaithful, infertile, or unable to provide, women could decide to end the marriage. These rights and freedoms were shattered when the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. They brought with them a patriarchal society that changed everything. The Spaniards imposed their Catholic beliefs. Women were stripped of their roles in leadership, trade, and society. Education was prioritized for men, while women were taught to be obedient daughters, dutiful wives, and religious mothers. The Spaniards introduced the Maria Clara ideal, a woman who was overly religious, modest, and submissive. Girls could no longer freely run, swim, or climb. The real Filipino was replaced by a colonial stereotype. Under Spanish rule, women were excluded from politics and leadership. They were told to stay silent, live in the shadows, and obey the men in their lives. When it comes to burials, ancient people in the Philippines and Southeast Asia had various practices depending on their beliefs. A common method was jar burial, where remains were placed in earthen jars, often with detailed designs, seen in areas like Palawan and Mindoro. Others used boat-shaped coffins, popular between the 12th and 15th centuries, symbolizing a journey to another world. In some communities, gold was placed on the nose, eyes, and mouth of the deceased to protect them from evil spirits. This also showed their status and importance, as seen in death masks found in places like Otan. Like some traditions, this too was changed or lost with the arrival of the colonizers. With the cross came a new way of life, and also a new way of dealing with death. The rituals that had been practiced for generations were called pagan and said to not fit with the teachings of the church. The indigenous people had to stop their sacred burial practices. Instead of cave burials and hanging coffins, they were made to use graves in churchyards, which were marked with crosses instead of gold. The detailed and elaborate death rituals they had before were changed and made simpler to follow Catholic rules. In the pre-colonial Philippines, marriage was more than just a union between two people. It was a celebration of family and community. When a man wanted to marry, he would announce his intentions by throwing a spear at the woman's house, calling on the gods for blessings. Next, the two families would come together to discuss the dowry. This wasn't just a gift, it could include animals, gold, or land. It was the groom's way of proving he could take care of his future wife. And in some cases, he'd even work for her family to show he was ready. On the day of the wedding, the couple would go to a priest for a special blessing. They'd mix their blood with rice, a symbol of their commitment to one another. And then, they exchanged jewels, solidifying their bond. But with the arrival of new influences, things started to change. The traditional ceremonies were replaced by church-led weddings. The dowry system became less important, and new laws surrounding marriage were introduced. Though many of these traditions faded, some still echo through Filipino culture today, blending the old with the new, and reminding us of a time when marriage was as much about community as it was about the couple. When the Spaniards arrived in the islands of the Visayas, they saw the people here covered in tattoos from head to toe. That's why they called the place Islas de los Pintados. But what really happened to this culture? Before colonization, tattoos symbolized strength, bravery, and spiritual connection. Each design told a story of battles, victories, and milestones like marriage or becoming a warrior. Some believed tattoos protected the soul and connected them to the gods. But when the Spanish colonizers arrived, they saw these tattoos as a pagan practice, a mark of resistance to Christianity. Spanish friars forced the native people to abandon the tradition. As Filipinos converted to Christianity, tattoos were seen as pagan and slowly faded away. Meanwhile, groups like the Tagalog and Moro had already stopped tattooing, influenced by Islam. Then, as modernization and Western influence spread, tattooing slowly disappeared from Filipino culture, buried under the weight of progress and foreign ideas. After centuries of silence, this lost art is making a comeback. Filipinos are embracing tattoos as a powerful symbol of pride, heritage, and the Filipino spirit.